Okay, give it a second to make sure we are actually live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I have the Rob of the Haze in the studio to chat with me about fantasy, 18 published books in multiple genres, and all things writing process, fantasy, and all of the things. So, Rob, welcome. Thank you so much for your time, and please introduce yourself to my guests.
Hello, guests. I'm Rob J. Hayes. I'm a British fantasy and science fiction author, mostly fantasy with a couple of sci-fi titles. This is where I try to remember them all. I've got the First Earth Saga, which is 6 books. That's like grim dark fantasy. Then I've got The War Eternal. That's 5 books, which is very dark fantasy, but sort of dark epic. I've got the Mortal Techniques books, which are 3 books and a short story. And they're kind of Asian sword and sorcery. What else? I've got others. I've got the Takes a Thief books. Those are steampunk heist capery adventures. I've got the Titan Hoppers books. Only one of them so far, but the other one's coming this year. Those are science fantasy progression science fantasy books. What else? Have I got anything else? I can't remember. There's books. I've got lots of books. Anyway. And so I'm here, and this is my first ever interview on one of these things where I'm stood up. So
Nice.
Little dance.
Nice. I will also dance, but I'm definitely sitting down in a chair. Sparrow Springs, Sarah is my best friend. I know you've chatted with her before. Josh says hi. Theo, I know, is reading Never Die right now because I kind of twisted his arm a little bit to make him read it. He's enjoying it. Sarah's gonna read it. I've been throwing this book at everyone that I know, so it should hopefully be making the rounds in my circles here. Josh wants to know if there's an audiobook version.
Yes, of Never Die, there is an audiobook version. You can get the audiobook of Never Die on its own, or you can, for a single credit, you can actually get all 3 of the Mortal Techniques books as the Heroic Age trilogy. So yes, I advise you to pick up that one rather than the solo book, because you get more bang for your credit if you are on Audible, because most of my audiobooks are Audible exclusive, I believe.
So who is your audiobook narrator?
For the Mortal Techniques, it's a lady called Kim Breton, who is absolutely fantastic.
Nice.
But then for different books, I've got different narrators, because a lot of my books go through Podium Audio, and I don't really have much of a say about anything with them. I just sort of hand them the manuscripts and the covers and then go, oh.
Nice. Josh is in. That's awesome. Sarah says hi. Anita, hi. Yep. Everybody who's like, can you recommend me a book? Have I mentioned Never Die at least 80 times in the last week? Derek, hi. Hi, Andrew. All right. So let's talk a little bit about generically. We're going to do spoiler-free chat first and just talk a little bit about writing process and your books. And then at the end, we'll switch over to spoiler chat so I can ask you all of the questions about Mortal Techniques that I've been waiting for months to ask. But I want to start with the fact that you've delved into quite a few different genres, like you mentioned before. And what is the draw for you about writing in all these different genres, and how do you decide, like, do you just look at and say, I'm going to try to write a sci-fi progression, or do you just kind of start with an idea and see what genre it ends up in?
Kind of both. I do it both those ways. So I love trying different things with my writing. I love exploring, basically. Like, for me, writing is very much a sort of like, it's an exploration. I love trying different perspectives and different settings and sort of like different characters and everything. So a lot of the time it's like, okay, what do I fancy writing? I might have the idea of, I want to write in a fantasy world, or I want to write in a science fiction world, or whatever. So with something like Drones, which is my sci-fi noir thing, which is currently not published because that's the one that I took my rights back for and haven't republished yet, but that's coming this year at some point. That was very much I wanted to write a cyberpunk story. So I had no idea what to do. I just was like, I want to write a cyberpunk. So I started trying to sort of like come up with an idea for it, basically, a way that I could set a story within a cyberpunk world. And in a similar sense, it was my first time I ever wrote first person because I wanted to give it a try. So I thought, I'll do it. I'll see how it turns out. And foolishly, I also decided with that very same book to also do my first time ever writing in present tense, which is horrible. Never do it ever.
I was just going to ask you how that experience was.
No. I'm fairly certain I could read through it again and still find a couple of instances where I slipped back into past tense because it's horrible. So yeah, a lot of it is just sort of I want to try different things, and then like with things like with Never Die, I've always been a big fan of like martial arts films and animes and that sort of thing, and I'd been watching a few films, basically, sort of like wire fu type films and the like, and I was like, I want to give this a go. So I just at that point I went, all right, I'm writing an Asian sword and sorcery story. We'll see how that goes. So yeah, but then there's sometimes where it depends what the world is sort of needs to be. With the War Eternal books, I didn't really have much in the way of world building at all when I set out writing it. I didn't really know what sort of story it was going to turn out to be until I got into it, and then it sort of like appeared, and it's like, oh yeah, so this is pretty dark and it's kind of epic. Sure, that works.
I hear about that a lot from different authors where sometimes they'll go into it and they'll have a specific genre in mind, and they I'm the kind of person where I feel like I just write the story and then it sort of falls wherever it falls, and I don't know, it sounds like that's kind of where you end up on the spectrum there as well.
Oh yeah, very much a pantser or a gardener rather than a plotter or an architect. Those are the terms, aren't they? Yes. It's just a
discovery writer kind of. Just intuitive, see where the story goes, kind of
get going and see what turns up along the way. It's what I have found is the further I go with a series, the more planning I do. I think it's because it's kind of required, as you've got a lot more of the world already there anyway. And by the fifth book of the War Eternal series, I was just like, okay, I know exactly what's happening in this story. It's weird.
That makes a lot of sense, and especially with something like the Mortal Techniques, because loosely each book builds on its on the previous one, and so it makes sense that you have to kind of look back and say, okay, what did I already say? How do I bring that into the next book? And so I can see where I'm on book 1 of a trilogy right now that I'm working on, and I can definitely see where once I get to books 2 and 3, I'm definitely going to lose my ability to just wing it.
Funnily enough, though, one of the most fun things about it is the way I prefer to write is if I'm writing a trilogy, I prefer to write the entire trilogy before I even release book 1. Because I'm such a pantser, it gives me the opportunity to then go back to book 1 and go, all right, I can change it to make sure that the bits in book 3 actually make sense.
That was one of the things you mentioned, really loving anime and the kind of martial arts movies and things like that. That was one of the things I really appreciated about Never Die, is I also grew up on anime, and so I loved that as soon as I started reading it, there was that, not just the story in itself, but it kind of brought back that nostalgia of all of those animes that I love so much, and all of the, that weapons aren't just blades all the time, and you have all these different, techniques and things, and that makes the fight scenes so much more interesting, and that's something that I want to talk about a little bit later too. But yeah, I loved you definitely pulled through that kind of anime martial arts nostalgia for me, and I just absolutely loved it.
It's entirely what I was going for. Basically, it's the more well-known ones are probably things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yes.
The sort of like the martial art films, and there's a lot of inspiration from some of those. Hero with Jet Li.
Yep.
Some of the less well-known ones, some of them are terrible. Like I used to watch films like A Man Called Hero. That's terrible, but it had some amazing bits in it. Like there's the bad guy whose name is he's actually called Invincible, and at one point he claws out his own eyes, so he won't have any more distractions.
As you do.
It's just, it's stuff like that. It sticks with you, and I love that sort of over the top,
yeah,
sort of like style that you sometimes get with those sorts of films.
well, and I think that's a line that, like, you can tip over into the there's too much cheesy in a story, but I mean, for me at least, with Mortal Techniques, there was so much of that was walking that line, but never fell into the okay, really, which does happen in some books where things happen and it's just way too far out there. But yeah, there's a fine line that I think you've kind of perfected, at least in this series, since that's the only one I've read. That really, there's so much humor in it, and there's so much. Each character has so much. I don't know, individuality, which is one of the things I really appreciated about it. But before I gush too much, there's a couple of questions I want to make sure I get to. Sarah wants to know, do you have a writing routine, dedicated time, or something that you can't write without, like music?
Yes, I do have a dedicated writing routine. I'm lucky enough to write full time these days. So my writing routine is pretty much I wake up at about 8 o'clock. I do admin until about 9, and then I write until the dog tells me that she needs to go for a walk. And then I get back from the walk, and then I write again until lunchtime, eat my lunch, write again until the dog says she needs another walk. And that's generally when I knock off. So it's kind of it's very structured, especially as my dog.
She's your alarm clock.
She is, and she's very good at it. It's usually about 10:30 where she's just like,
wow.
So she's pretty good at that.
Excellent supervisor.
Yeah, but I can't actually write with music or anything like that. Basically, I need as close to quiet as possible. So I have many noise cancelling headphones hidden around the house and stuff. But I do like to listen to music when I'm doing plotting and or dreaming, as I like to call it. So it's like I'll quite often just stick my headphones on and just go for a pace around the house.
Yep.
Just walking up and down, because it's a good way to occupy the body. And then with music on it, it just sort of like also helps to get me in the right headspace. So, I've got like some artists like Two Steps from Hell, who are great for sort of, big epic scores and stuff. And so you find the right tracks for the right sort of thing you're going for. And I tend to have different playlists. So if I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing I need to try and focus on a battle scene, I'll have some music which works for sort of battle scenes or whatever. And then other bits for some more sort of like emotional scenes and stuff as well. So yeah, that's kind of my writing routine. It's very structured in the sort of almost 9 to 5. 5 days a week. I kind of almost keep office hours, because that way I've got a routine and it stops me from slacking off.
Yeah. Well, it's smart if you're able to write full time. That is your 9 to 5. I mean, you've got 18 books out. I can't imagine the amount of just all of the things that you have to keep track of for, like you said, the admin hour in the morning. I bet that's very full.
It's horrible. A lot of it is looking at ads and sort of like figuring out how to play with ads and stuff, and replying to emails. Oh God, I hate it. I wish I had I honestly wish I had an assistant who could take all that off me, and like I could just be like, no, just do the writing, thanks. I think that's why a lot of authors still chase the traditionally published route, even when self-published might be better off for them, for the simple fact that a lot of that still gets taken off their hands, which it's a definite draw.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that kind of, I mean, I'll just piggyback right off of that. Do you briefly, what was the draw for you of self-pub? What is it about publishing and being your own boss that has kept you in that for as long as 18 books?
Yeah, I mean, I did originally, when I first wrote my first trilogy, I did play around with sort of like trying to find a traditionally published a traditional publisher for it. I think I submitted to a few agents and didn't really get much of a bite, basically. So I just thought, well, there's this new thing called self-publishing, which a lot of people are talking about, so I'll give it a try. And I mean, this was 10 years ago now. It was not what it once was. So I just thought I'll give it a try. And it turned out that, it did quite well for me.
Yeah.
So I kept going with it, basically. And it is very nice because you do get to be your own boss. You do get to write what you want to write. Because the whole thing with traditional publishing is they will only publish certain things. There's a lot of things they're just not going to publish over because they don't think it's going to sell.
Right.
Or it's just not what they're doing at the time, not what traditional publishing is after at the time. Like at the moment, there's a lot of talk about the fact that they're just not really into epic fantasy at the moment. So
we are.
Yeah, readers still definitely are. You can
can
see it. I mean, like there's things like Brandon Sanderson. He clearly just writes epic fantasy, and it's still he still blows up. There's a bunch of others as well. So the readership is still there. It's just traditionally published houses just either don't think they can sell it or don't want to.
Yeah.
So I think you get a lot more variety these days in self-publishing because it allows people to just explore what they want to explore rather than trying to chase a specific market. And it might mean that their books don't sell as much as like some traditionally published authors, but at the same time, it's more of a sort of like explosion of creativity that's exploring all sorts of different avenues.
Yeah. And would you also say that being, a self-pub author and kind of doing all of your own legwork, that kind of allows you to build a really tight-knit community fan base also because you're in it more, I would say. There's a lot of times with the trad pub authors, they don't have as much direct, they do the book signings or whatever, but there's not as much direct interaction with their fan base.
I think to a degree, but I think a lot of that is just changing with the sort of like the way that the world is changing, the way that the internet has just changed everything, basically. I think it's quite rare to find an author these days, at least an emerging author, to have a decent readership without being there to talk to their fans, basically. I mean, you still get a lot of them, especially the bigger names who have been around for a while, who maybe they don't interact at all. But then a lot of them, I mean, they're on all sorts of social media and they're always happy to talk to other people. And so I think that's just a way that
an overall change.
That's just been influenced by the internet and social media.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole different reading experience I've found when you are able to connect with the author and they're on interviews and you can go learn more about their writing process. It's a really cool way to experience the stories they write, I think. So I love that that's kind of one of the ways that the industry is moving forward.
It certainly is. I was actually reading, what's it called? It's The Wounded Kingdom, isn't it, by R.J. Barker. I was reading that a couple of years ago, and I was actually just messaging him on Twitter at the same time, just talking to him about it. It was great fun. It was just like, I got to just sort of like shoot questions at him when I had one that popped into my head, which is just like, it's something I've never done before. I don't think I pissed him off too much. He sent me a postcard with some alternate art on it, so that was quite cool.
Well, that's a good sign. Yeah, that's a good sign. Derek wants to know, how do you manage drawing inspiration from other cultures or countries, kind of like the inspiration versus appropriation debate, where some books or series sometimes get labeled as the latter?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And you are free to answer or not answer any of the questions as you choose.
I'll always try and answer them. There are very few questions I won't give a go at answering. I've had some weird ones over the years, not like this, like in messages. God, some people are odd. Anyway, that's a completely different topic, though.
One of the downsides of being an accessible author, I suppose.
Yeah. The way I sort of do it is just to make sure that I do my research, basically, and I try to be respectful about it. I think a lot of the calls for appropriation often come from when people try to, or not try to, but they they just sort of accidentally or on purpose fetishize the different
Mhm.
culture that they're writing in, and that's something that I definitely try to stay away from personally. So I did a lot of research, both around the sort of like the culture and the languages as much as I could as well. I'm not very good with languages though, um, but and then there's also the fact that it's something that, while I've never been to Japan or China, which is sort of like the mortal techniques is set in a world that's sort of very inspired by ancient China and ancient Japan. I've there's something that I've known about for a long time because I've been watching like so many different films and TV shows. I've done a lot of reading around it and everything. It's a culture that I've always found fascinating myself. So there's been a lot of incidental research sort of done in that sort of end.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part I've done a good job. There are still do still see reviews where people are sort of like, oh yes, cultural appropriation, all that lot. And yeah, so
Yeah.
hopefully I've done a good enough job where most people don't think that though.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's a way to pay homage to something that you find really beautiful, fascinating, and there's such an amazing richness to all of these cultures that it's um as a writer, I would imagine it's fun to be able to pay homage to something that means a lot to you as a person.
Absolutely. And you find so many different. I mean, you obviously find things like demons and spirits in Western culture as well.
Yep.
But some of the things you find in like the sort of like Japanese culture,
They're
the
pretty
yokai,
wild.
they're so out there and crazy. It's like, yeah, like possessed umbrellas and spirits who just like come alive and blow out lanterns because that's what they do. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating. I love it.
Well, and I find it fascinating, and I feel like this isn't really a spoiler because it's just part of the world. But there's so many different spirits within the mortal techniques that how they die dictates what kind of a spirit that they become and what then kind of powers or techniques they're able to use. And that's fascinating to kind of to see how that all is different. And you would think, oh, it's a yokai or it's a whatever, but it's not. It's something specific. Like it's
Yeah,
very specific
yeah.
to each one, which is cool.
I absolutely love it. That was one of the most fun bits of research I did, especially for Spirits of Vengeance, because yokai features so incredibly heavily in it.
Yeah.
The research just going into the yokai, and yeah, the sort of like because there's so many different types. There's the sort of like the more general types of ones, but then there's specific like spirits that have names and like were created, I suppose, or came into being through very usually horrific deaths and
Hmm.
stuff. And yeah, no, it's wonderful. So all of the yokai in the mortal techniques are based on like actual Japanese myths, basically of these yokai. But it was just me putting my own little spins on them, um, and giving them supernatural, crazy techniques and
Bringing
powers.
them into a fantasy world. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Andrew wants to know, Rob, you're a recreationist, right? What is your preferred weapon?
I used to be. I don't do it anymore since I got a couple of ribs broken and was just like, you know what, this is for me. But yes, I used to do Viking reenactment.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, my favorite weapon was a bearded axe because I loved hooking it onto other people's shields and dragging them out of the shield wall so somebody else could be like, aha, and stab them. I was very much a support player.
Nice. I just interviewed Matthew Harvey, who's a historical fiction writer, and he has an axe that features very prominently in his book Wolf of Wessex. And he actually had a smith make the axe for him, and it's got all
No
this etching
way.
in the blade, and oh, it's so cool. I'll see if I can take a screenshot of the interview because he held it up and showed us, and I'll send it to you because it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I'd love to get like a weapon made from one of my books or something.
Yeah,
Really
wouldn't that be
cool.
awesome? That's like
Mounted on a wall.
the dream of every fantasy writer, I think.
Yeah, it's very sort of Gemmel with the Druss's axe, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Trisha, entire trilogy before release. That's amazing. You must write very fast. How many, like, do you have word counts that you generally average a day, or is that just
Yeah,
kind of daily basis?
while I'm in a writing period, because I sort of like have writing or editing periods or whatever.
Mm,
While I'm in a writing period, I have a word count of roughly 2,000 words a day.
okay.
Um, but that's just it's a rough guide basically. If
Sure.
I hit it, great. If I go over it, fantastic. If I don't hit it, I don't beat myself up.
Right.
But it's quite rare that I don't hit at least that sort of like 2,000 mark basically.
Yeah.
So I do write quite fast, but there's also the fact that when I don't quite have the buffer anymore. But when I
Sure.
first started releasing my books, I mean, I released my first trilogy on a single day, all 3 books on a single day, because
Wow.
I'd never published anything before, and I'd just been writing them on my own, and just thought they're all there. um, and then due to the way that I published, and then I signed with an indie publisher, which was a terrible mistake. Don't do that. Anyway, I I didn't really release much for a few years. It wasn't until 2017 that I started actually properly releasing books again.
Mm,
So by that point, I had quite a few books ready to go because I'd not stopped writing. That I kind of had a buffer where I was releasing books that I'd written 4 years ago, so I had time to write new books. So I was at that point where I was like, okay, well, I can write an entire trilogy and not release it until 3 years down the line because I've got other books to publish in the meantime.
right.
I'm not quite there anymore. I'm kind of at the point where I'm mostly caught up, so I can't do that quite as much. But I'm trying to, because it's the way I prefer to do it.
Yeah.
So I've got to figure out a better way of writing and releasing books, basically.
Giving yourself more time so that you can kind of have less pressure as you're working on the next one.
Exactly. So at the moment, it's kind of like, well, I'll release these Titan Hoppers books as I write them, but then I'll spend the rest of my time writing this giant chunky epic fantasy, which hopefully I'll have all 3 books mostly written by the time I release book 1.
Okay, and you said, when is that one kind of sort of due-ish?
That's coming next year.
Okay.
So I've already written book 1. Book 1's been written for a couple of years now, and
Okay.
I'm about to start launching into book 2. But then I've also given myself this task of writing a prequel series to go along with it. So
funny how those pop up, isn't it?
yeah. One of these days I'm going to stop giving myself more work.
It's funny. I talk to so many people and it's like, yep, I'm going to write a standalone. And the next time I talk to him, well, it might be a trilogy. And then, oh, well, there could be a prequel series to that. And it's just, I mean, it never ends.
Well, I mean, Never Die was originally a standalone. I never had any intention of writing more in the world. And then people were just like, we really like this. We want more. So I was like, all right.
Well, I'm so glad you decided to keep going.
I am too.
So with all of the subgenres, I know that we're not supposed to play favorites, but is there a specific series or subgenre that you have enjoyed writing in the most?
Yeah, to be honest, I love chunky epic fantasies. I love reading them. I love how in depth they can get in the sort of like the ways that you can properly build and develop the characters. So I think for me, big chunky epic fantasies are probably my favorite. I mean, I like Spirits of Vengeance. I absolutely loved because it was like I was already writing in the Mortal Techniques world, which has already started building. There's a lot of fun in it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this one an epic fantasy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then yeah,
When I opened Spirits of Vengeance, I had read, the first 2. I opened it and then I was like, man, this box is heavy. And then I pulled it out and I was like, I was not expecting this.
It's as long as Never Die and Pawn's Gambit put together. So yeah, a lot bigger. And then yeah, with this chunky epic fantasy I'm writing at the moment, I love how like I can have like multiple different characters. I've got like 7 different character point of views in book 1, and I've got like arcs mapped out for all of them, and it's great. It's so much fun to be able to go into that sort of depth and
Oh yeah.
So I think that's probably my favorite. But then I also do love a bit of sword and sorcery. Like the Mortal Techniques books, for the most part, are just so much fun to write because they're just these self-contained stories, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't need to worry about future arcs down the line. I'm just like, nope, 100,000 words. There we go. There's a story done.
Yeah. Yep. It's a lot. It's very, I can imagine that it's a kind of a source of pride when you can finish something that's a big epic fantasy chunker, but there's also something very nice about just being able to say, got my 100,000 word book, and put it out in the universe and go right back to something else.
Yeah, although my books have, these days at least, I have a habit of going over my word counts. So this prequel trilogy for the chunky epic fantasy I'm writing at the moment, they were originally supposed to be novellas. I recently finished the first one, and it's already at 50,000 words in editing. So,
Whoops.
Apparently, it's not a novella anymore.
I don't think anyone's going to complain, honestly.
I hope not.
I did want to bring this up from Derek. So I wanted to mention, I actually think that topic is a really, really good one to bring up, and especially when we're reading books and writing books in different cultures and stuff. So I wanted to make sure that I gave that time for us to comment on that. But I always want to make sure my author has the option to not answer any questions, because I am kind of putting them on the spot. So
That's what I'm here for.
You never know. Rob, can you talk about your genre, wanderlust, since all of your series are so distinctly different? You kind of mentioned that a little bit at the beginning of the stream.
Kinda. Hello, Mahir, by the way. He's one of my alpha readers. He just sneaks in here and joins for everything.
Welcome,
yeah,
Mahir.
I don't know. I love writing across the different genres. I love just exploring different things and trying out new and different ideas, basically. And yeah, one day I hope to write like a YA, just because I've never done it before properly. Yeah. Although some people say Titan Hoppers is a bit YA, so I don't know.
Maybe you're just
romance. We'll try romance next.
Okay. Add that. It'll be all of these epic fantasies, sword and sorcery, all of this action stuff, and then Rob J. Hayes romance series.
Absolutely.
Yeah, why not?
I'm not entirely sure I'd be able to drag my readers with me a lot. Maybe not.
Josh wants to know, what are some resources you would suggest for new authors looking to go straight in with self-publishing?
I don't know what sort of sense you mean. To be honest, the greatest resource you can have is actually the community, the writing community at large. You'll find it incredibly welcoming, especially on places like Twitter and Discord. And it's without a doubt the greatest resource you can find, because it's full of other people who are doing the same sort of thing. They're writing. It's a nice little support group. You know, there's people to commiserate with when you get a bad review, or celebrate with when you get a good review. If ever you're like, okay, I need some help with this section that I'm writing, or with this blurb or whatever, there's always going to be people that are there to offer advice. And also people willing to share contact details for things like artists or editors or whatever. So yeah, I definitely think the community is the most valuable resource you can find, basically.
Yeah.
So other than that, there's a ton of like specific things like the different writing programs you can use and everything. I use Scrivener, which I find excellent. But yeah, join the communities, get in touch with them, and make friends, and yeah, talk to them about writing.
Yeah. So in that question, you mentioned 1-star and 5-star reviews. So after 18 books, I can imagine that you would have some good advice for people who are just getting their first 1-star review and are crestfallen over it. How do you deal with people not enjoying your books when that comes around?
You turn the loss into a win. No, seriously, like I love creating little sort of like graphics, and I like to help sell my books. And the most successful one I've ever created has been for Never Die, and it's literally just quotes from 1-star reviews.
I loved it. It was great.
there's brilliant ones like this book's a dumpster trash fire, and what the hell is that ending? And this reads like an Oriental D&D adventure, and there's all sorts of like, but you can usually find these like insane quotes in like 1-star reviews, because if you've managed to give somebody that much of an emotional reaction that they hate your book, that they are passionate about hating your book, chances are they've gone on a bit of a rant at some point, and you can be like, right, I'm going to take that little snippet from what you've written, I'm going to post it in a graphic, and I'm going to sell books off your hate.
It was great. That one made me laugh. I was scrolling through Twitter, and I kind of rolled, oh, cool, Rob made a graphic, arrow graphic, and then I stopped and I was like, wait a second. It was a good one.
I've got a couple for the War Eternal books as well, where
Nice.
There's a nice little contrast. So there's one person going, oh, I hate Eska, she's an absolute bitch, and there's like the other side of it is just like, I absolutely love Eska, she's an absolute bitch. So there's just nice, the ability to contrast, because the art is so subjective. You'll find one person hates this thing and the other person loves the exact same thing. So you can always sort of like take those little bits and just turn your losses into a win and use it to sell more books to people.
Yep. Hey Shad, thanks for joining us. Oh my goodness, I need to catch up. Everybody has lots of comments. Esme, just popping in to say hi and to thank Rob for writing one of my speaking of Eska, all-time favorite characters. Never Die is on the docket for next month, and I am ready to fall in love. So good, Esme. You're gonna love it.
Speaking of Eska, look, artwork behind me.
Beautiful. Mine is on the way to me, and I've been saving up because those hardcovers, when you posted them on Twitter, it was like, there's no way I'm not getting these hardcovers. They're beautiful. Ooh. They're so beautiful. Ugh. Also,
I love those.
Speaking of the War Eternal, one of the things that I really appreciate is they're very unique titles, and I really like them. So how do you go about titling? We're going way out, like heck with the script. I'll just throw it out. How do you title your books? Because I appreciated the I don't know, kind of the freshness of the titles of the War Eternal. So how do you go about titling your books?
Sometimes titles are there before the book even starts. Yeah. Like Never Die, definitely. That title was just there before I even started writing the book. I've gone very blurry. Look at that. In fact, Portland's Gambit and Spirits of Vengeance, those three titles were always there from before I started writing it. With the War Eternal books, I spent a long time not having titles for any of them. I'd written the entire trilogy and I was struggling to find titles for them. And then they just sort of like appeared in my head at some point. You just sort of like, you note down little words or lines that sound pretty cool that may or may not work, and then all sorts, basically. So a lot of it is just you just keep thinking and and sort of like seeing what pops into your head until something sticks and you're like, oh, that works. And I quite often find that listening to music with lyrics is a good way to try and come up with some good titles as well. Not like actually copying lyrics, but I find that with certain bands especially, they're sort of like, they're almost poetic in the sort of lyrics, and a lot of it is that way of triggering the imagination so that different words fit into place in the right way, and just go, oh yeah, that's a title, and it works for the book as well. Right. So yeah, with the War Eternal books, it was a right challenge to try and find the titles for them. Up until the final two books, which again, I had the titles before I even started writing the books. So there's no one answer to that one. It's just like, I don't know.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes it takes longer.
Yeah, it's in some ways sometimes they're easy. Sometimes it's like trying to write a blurb for your book, and it's the most hellish thing that you can possibly imagine.
Oh, blurbs are the death. Like the writing, whenever people's like, okay, so elevator pitch your book, and it's like, I can give you the 500 pages of the book, and then you can tell me what you think of it. How about that?
Yeah, blurbs are awful. Trying to like. If I'm just going to do a comparison, that's fairly easy. I can do that as an elevator pitch. But yeah, like, okay, here's 300 words to describe your book.
Yep. How about 300 pages to describe my book? Yeah. That'd be better. Yes, I heard about this. So I heard that you actually ate a page of a book on, yes. Or was it a page of a book or just a random piece of paper on page?
It was a page of the book. It hasn't been sent out yet, so I'll show it to you, because I was on page chewing with Taylor, Steve and and because it was called page chewing. There we go. I ripped out a page of Along the Razor's
The
Edge.
desecration hurts my soul.
I hate it, and I haven't sent this out. This is going out to the winner. I can't remember who won it, but yeah, somebody, one of the people who was listening, has won that book, which I'll be
That's
sending out
awesome.
this week.
That's awesome. Hey Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Always a party. Let's see. I'm making sure I haven't.
I'll tell you what. If we're doing a party, surely I should have a hat. So
Perfect. Even better. I feel maybe I should have. Well, I mean, the beanie is kind of iconic at this point, so I think if I switched it out, everyone would be mad at me.
I like it. What's the wolf design in?
That is the Howler symbol from Red Rising.
Ah, I've not read that one yet.
Red Rising is my favorite, one of, but my favorite fantasy series, which is why I anticipate really, really loving War Eternal, because dark coming of age stories are one of my absolute favorite things to read. So I have very high anticipation for that one.
Well, fingers crossed. The War Eternal is very. It's Marmite. You either love Esker or you hate her. And if you love Esker, you'll get on with the book. And if you hate Esker, you probably won't.
I feel pretty optimistic at this point. I feel pretty optimistic. I do love a good anti-hero, so I'm here for it.
She definitely fits.
Well, she'll fit a prompt in my readathon, so that'll be great. Let's see. Everybody's talking. Andrew got in trouble. Yeah, Mike had a good point. As if this reads like an Oriental D&D adventure is a bad thing.
I know.
For some
but
people, apparently.
Somebody didn't like it, but hey, I thought it was a good one.
Rob, do you roll dice for your titles?
I don't. No. Although that might actually help. Yeah, if you just have a bunch of words and D100s, roll D100s to see what you come up with.
Yeah, there you go.
Like I did you know those memes you get where it's like, oh, what's your birthday? You get this name. What's your first letter of your first name? All that.
Yep.
I did one of those for the Mortal Techniques at one point to see what your hero name was going to be. That was quite fun.
Nice. Yeah, Joe says, if I could describe the book in 300 words, I wouldn't have written 120,000 of them. Yes. Touche.
Also, hello.
Yeah, hey, Joe. I didn't skip your comment, Mike. I just read it. I was scrolling for a while. You guys have a lot of comments. That's one of the things that's always interesting on the live streams is there's a completely different conversation going on in the comments usually.
Yeah. Trying to keep track of it all. That's what I sort of glance at them and sometimes I'm like,
yeah, I know. Let's see. Absolutely. Where am I at? I'm about 220 pages into Spirits of Vengeance. I'm hoping to finish it finished and reviewed by Monday night, because that's when the readathon ends.
Ooh, is that the paperback?
Yes, it is. Someday.
The paperback doesn't have the internal art, does it?
No, it doesn't. Are you going to make me give me some serious book jealousy right now? And I'm not sure I'm okay with it.
I'll find some. Oh, there's interior artwork in here somewhere. Is that one? It also has these fancy black title pages, which are very cool. Dragons on, but yeah.
I'm gonna have to replace
one of these pieces of artworks.
I'm gonna have to replace all my books now, aren't I? You're doing
There is definitely artwork in it. I'm sure I included artwork in it, but I can't seem to find any. Oh dear. Anyway, that's got to be one, surely. Nope, that's not one either. Anyways.
PL also said.
One. See, there's interior artworks.
Ooh.
There we go.
That's awesome.
Done by Stas Borodin.
Darn it. Well, I was happy with my paperbacks, but now I'm not. So I'm going to have to get the hardbacks at some point now.
Yes, this is what we like to do.
You're doing a great job.
Multiple copies.
Yeah, PL said Where Loyalties Lie was even better, in my opinion. So I didn't actually know. The two that I had heard about of yours were Mortal Techniques and then War Eternal. And then I saw when Titan Hoppers, the cover was going around. I did not realize you had written kind of a, is it like kind of a, you said like a piratey, heisty kind of,
No, so Where Loyalties Lie is
or
it's
am
a
I
bit
thinking of a
convoluted.
different one?
Yeah, you're thinking of the It Takes a Thief books,
Yes,
which are
yes, yes,
my
yes.
steampunk heisty ones.
Yes.
No, Where Loyalties Lie. This is the convoluted bit. So it's the first book in the Best Laid Plans duology.
Okay.
However, it's also part of the larger First Earth saga
Ah,
series. So I've collected it now into just the First Earth saga. So it's like 6 books long. However, it's like the 4th book in that series and the first book in the Best Laid Plans duology. And it's very much grimdark pirates, basically. So yeah, it's if you like Black Sails,
yeah.
you'll probably like it.
Oh yeah.
But it's it's a lot darker than something like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's like if somebody took Pirates of the Caribbean and actually had pirating in it,
Mm.
instead of just people going around going, "Arr, I'm a pirate."
And pouring wine through their ribcage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I enjoy Pirates of the Caribbean for what it is, but they're not pirates. They do no pirating.
It's true. They, yeah. I mean, other than Elizabeth Bennet being dragged along on the Black Pearl, that's about as the extent of the, yeah. Yeah. Although
Yeah.
Barbossa is quite a fabulous character, in my
Oh, I
opinion.
love
I love
Barbossa,
Barbossa.
and like there's the scene. I absolutely love this where the mast is falling and everybody's scattering, and he just steps to the side. It crushes. And I'm like, oh my god, I love that scene
So awesome.
so much.
Yeah. Well, you said Grimdark Pirates, and I'm sold. So I will. I mean, what will probably happen is in the next couple of weeks, I'm just going to go buy all of the Rob Hayes books and just slowly work through them this year.
You know what? I support that decision.
So I feel like you're kind of telling me there's this. Is there like a Rob J. Hayes Cosmere thing going on where all of the books are secretly intertwined somehow?
No.
Just those.
No, I do get that because a lot of people are just like, oh, where do I start? Which of your books do I start with? Are they all interconnected? I'm just like, no, just pick the series you want to start
Pick
with
one.
and read
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the nice parts about having 18 books is you have a little something for everyone to start with. So
Exactly.
that's nice. Yeah, Mike recently read Never Die and enjoyed it. He's been talking about it quite a bit, as he should.
He did a lot of nice little, a short and then mentioned on a few videos. Yes, I've been watching Mike's videos as well. So thank you, Mike. It was wonderful, your reviews.
First Earth Saga, dark fantasy at its finest. See, the problem is now I'm second guessing all of my decisions on what I need to read first.
All of them. Read them all at once.
Just throw out the rest of the TBR for the year.
Absolutely.
Matt, I like that someone other than me uses the word heisty. Oh yeah, I love a heisty book.
There's not enough of them. Like,
no, it's so true.
Whenever I see like somebody saying I want books with heists in it, the books that are mentioned usually have no heists in whatsoever. They're just about thieves. And it's like,
yeah,
there's no heist. If you want heists, you want things like Ocean's 11 style heists, where it's like this convoluted plan that gets messed up and has to be fixed on the fly and stuff.
Yep.
So that's exactly the sort of thing that I was going for in the It Takes a Thief books. Like this proper feeling of heist. So there are literally in both the books, there are literally like 3 heists, I think, in each.
Nice.
And they're like big, long 10,000 word chapters with like timelines, like nipping back to timelines where they're like, aha, this is the plan, and then nipping forward to how it all goes wrong and stuff.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons. One of my other favorite series is Gentlemen Bastards by Scott Lynch. Lies of Locke Lamora is just I needed a heist in my life, and when I read that, it was like, yep, this is everything I was looking for. You got bromance, you've got heist, you've got like it's very grim dark. It was perfect.
It is, and it's witty as hell. It's absolutely fantastic, and it also has one of my favorite covers in all of fantasy, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with the book.
Rob, you need to hire me to explain your series to new fans.
Probably.
I mean,
I do a terrible job of it. I just sit there and start going, it's got stuff.
Well, you said Grimdark Pirates. I feel like that's enough of a hook for the Thief series. See you later, Mike. Thanks for dropping in. I mean, if I did nothing but read like if I sat down and did nothing but read, and totally forgot the fact that I also need to be writing a book right now, which I'm not doing a very good job of with all the books I'm reading. Yeah, I think it would take me more than a few short weeks, couple of months probably. Mahir wants me to ask you about the presence of moons in his different worlds, or in your different worlds.
Yeah. So each of my worlds has a different number of moons in it.
Oh.
So there is in First Earth, I believe there's only the one moon. I've got to try and remember it all. In the War Eternal, there are 2 moons. In the God Eater series, the Age of the God Eater, there are 3 moons. And yeah, there's other numbers of moons in my other different worlds. So each series will have a different number of moons in it.
Huh. And
that's all I'm going to say on it.
And you're not going to tell us what sparked that decision? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. That's fair. Author secrets
That's
are fair.
just a thing.
But fair.
Yeah. Maybe one day it'll all become apparent. Who knows?
You never know. Okay, so I think I have covered most everything. If you guys have any last questions for the spoiler-free section, let me know in the comments, because after that, briefly, I'm going to turn it over to spoilers, and we're going to chat Never Die and Pawn's Gambit and 220 pages worth of Spirits of Vengeance. Matt has a theory. Here come the fan theories.
Not quite, because I've created more worlds than that. So, you know, if I was going sequentially like that, then yeah, First Earth would only have 1 moon, but then the It Takes a Thief world would have 2 moons, rather than the War Eternal. The War Eternal is like the 5th world that I've created, so that should have 5 moons. But that's not how it works. Interesting.
Will we ever know? All right, guys, I'm going to put the second banner on. I'm going to give everybody a minute to dip out if they do not want to hear any spoilers for Never Die. Thank you, PL, for joining us. Yep, thank you guys so much. And once you have read Rob's Mortal Techniques series, which you should immediately go do, then you can come back and watch the second half of the video. All right, thanks, Josh.
Okay.
Here, okay, I'm gonna I'll see if I can remember that. So when I get that far, I will see if I can catch it. Matt's out. Yeah, I'm taking a list of names here as to people that I'm going to be bothering in the next couple of weeks. Have you read it yet?
I know. This is how we thin out the crowd. Oh, all you people haven't read Never Die yet. I see. Yes.
Off you go.
Send them books. Read it.
That's right. Read it right now. Okay, so let's chat a little bit about I think I'm going to just go the series as a whole, because that'll be easier, because I have ADHD, so it's going to be impossible for me to go one book at a time.
Fine.
What I love, one of the things I absolutely love about this series is the way that you give just enough of a through line through the next books to kind of familiarize the reader with, oh yeah, this, so for Pawn's Gambit, you have, oh my goodness, and of course all of the names are going to escape me now.
Ling Sen, also known as Yu. Or
yes.
Yu. I can never pronounce it. It's like Yu. I don't know. I can't pronounce, like, it's stupid. I can't pronounce half the names, but I know what they are in my head, but then I can't form them properly. But yeah.
Well, it's so weird, because our mouths, the way that we speak, our mouths are like formed to make certain sounds, and then you go find a language, like I'm learning Korean right now, and I have to stop and okay, my mouth does not know how to make this sound at all.
You have to sort of, it feels like contorting it into a different shape to try and make the right so yes, I know the word, I know the names, what they're meant to sound like, but I quite often pronounce them completely wrong.
So I love that you bring that through. And then of course when Yanmei shows up in Spirits of Vengeance and Kira, that all made me I was like, oh, because it's almost like reading the next book is exciting, because you're waiting to see who's going to show up that you already know. So how do you decide which character you're going to bring forward into the next book, or characters?
Yeah. So with Never Die, basically it was decided when my sister read the book and went, "I really like Dayu Lingson," and I was like,
Mm,
"Cool, I'll write a book about her."
nice.
So that was kind of how that was decided. But and then I was about halfway through writing Pawn's Gambit when I decided that there was going to be a third book anyway. And at that point, I already knew that I wanted Kira to be the character that was going forwards. Um, and then I thought, okay, maybe I'll have Yanmei with her basically. So it's very much about, okay, which character do I want to write more about?
Yeah.
In Pawn's Gambit, when I first started writing Kira, she was a character that just seemed so interesting to me
Yeah.
as I was writing her. Because I mean, obviously, I wouldn't spoil this, so I can talk about. Obviously, she's literally introduced as this like girl in the mirrors who's trying
Yeah.
to convince you to kill herself, basically.
Yeah.
And then when she's rescued, she's just a young girl who's just traumatized by the fact that
Yeah.
she's been a yokai for 80 odd years.
Yeah.
So I just felt like there was a lot that I could explore with her character, basically, which is
Yeah.
how I chose to move her forwards. And with Yanmei moving on from book 1 to book 2 and then to book 3, she's the only character that's been in all of them, I think. Yes.
Yeah. She's awesome.
Well, yeah. So yeah, she's the only character who has been in all of them, and yeah, she was just. I liked her powers. I liked the fact that she had a past that I could, sort of like was quite traumatic that I could draw from. So and she was just a very, yeah, I can see Mahir really likes her in the chat. She's a very different character to a lot of the characters that I write in. She's very sort of caring in a world where she probably shouldn't be, basically.
Yeah.
So I felt like there was a lot that I could do with her character as well. So yeah, that's mostly it's for the most part it's having characters that I think that I can do more with and explore more. Except for one character who does actually appear in all of them, but I can't talk to you yet because you haven't finished Spirits of Vengeance. So.
Okay, I'll get back to you on that. So one of my favorite tropes of all time to read ever is Motley Crue. And that was one of the things that sold me so much on Never Die, because, and I feel like people don't give enough credit to how much, how difficult it is to create a Motley Crue that all have very distinct individual characters that are all contrasts of each other. So there's, and that was one of the things in Never Die that and you started off, we meet Itami and then we meet Jihao, and the two of them are immediate contrasts to each other. And they're my two favorite characters in Mortal Techniques still. We'll see if anybody from Spirits of Vengeance takes that spot. But how do you go about creating a Motley Crue and making sure all these characters have their own story and their own distinct feel on the page?
It's a lot of it is about just sort of like, okay, what do I want this character to sort of portray, and so you've got to make sure there is that contrast. You've got to make sure that they're not all the same, and then you also want the relationships between the different characters to be completely different as well.
Yeah.
So with something like Never Die, yeah, there's Jihao, who's very much a sort of flighty type of arsehole of a character. At least that's how he's supposed to come across. He's obviously going to not really get on with Itami, but at the same time, because of the way that Jihao is, where he kind of wants to be a hero, even though he doesn't think of himself as one. He sees Itami as a hero, right. So it's almost like he wants to look up to her, but then at the same time he doesn't like her because she's a hero and he's a bandit.
Right.
And then you throw like Iron Gut into the situation as well, and it's like you've got things like Jihao's just really he's not very confident in himself, really. He's because he doesn't want to be a bandit, really. He wants to be a hero. And then you've got like Iron Gut, who's just so confident. That's all he is. He's just confidence. He's all bluster. So, there's obviously going to be a lot of different ways that they interact. So a lot of it is just it's having the characters interact in different ways between each,
Yeah.
and making sure that they all get a chance to interact with each other, so that their separate personalities get to shine in different scenes with different people, basically.
Yeah.
And with G, how you base a character on a cat, that works.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, his entire character is based on a cat, basically. I even have there's even the scene where he literally just pushes a bowl off a table
Yep.
because
That makes so much sense. Because, and one of the things I loved about Itami Cho, we talked. I mean, I just had imposter syndrome last night, where we talked about writing women in fantasy, and one of the female characters I brought up was Itami, because um, I love that she's kind of the anchor of this motley crew the whole time, and and I think a lot of times when you have a character that's more, she's not reserved, but she doesn't, throw her emotions all over the place the way some of the other
stoic. I
characters.
like to
Yeah,
think
she's
of
more
her as
stoic.
stoic.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we're too quick to write those characters off as less nuanced. But what I loved was, as the story went along, there was just constantly layers peeling off of all of these characters, and Itami was a big part of that. And I love that she gives off this kind of tired mom vibe after a while, because she's got these like unruly children that she's trying to keep in line, including her master Ein, who's, just as bad as everyone else. And after a while, you
Yes.
can tell like Itami just needs a good foot massage and some cucumbers.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, very tired. And that might be me relating to a character a little bit in the book, but
It's
this
always the
tired.
way. I relate a lot to Guang, to be honest, because in Spirits of Vengeance, because of his knees.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love, and he's been great, because again, you have that. I love when authors really get that contrast between characters, and you have Haruto, who's this, Guang is a sidekick, but he's um yeah, he's the, I'm trying to keep up with this kid, and I'm just like, he's always doing all this stuff, and like, I'm just here to write the poems about it, kind of thing. And
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. No. I love that. I love being able to write different types of characters, especially. And yeah, like Itami she was great to write, because it was fun to write this sort of like, this stoic character who, she's not as like bombastic as Jihao or Iyengar, but then there's a lot more to her in some ways, at least more than maybe Iyengar, who is very much just bluster. Bring me a chicken. I loved writing Iyengar as well. Actually, I loved writing all of them. They're just so much fun.
Yeah. And it came off the page, because you can really tell when an author is having fun with the characters that they're writing. And Jihao, in my character awards for this last year, he was one of the main reasons why I couldn't mentally put Never Die Down, why I was still thinking about the book 2 months later, because his character arc through the books, in my opinion, is one of my favorite like redemption arcs I've seen in a book in a long time. And just I was so emotional over it at the end, because it was just like, oh, he's finally going to be the hero, but we're losing him, and that's just so awful. Why would you do that?
I know. No, I loved his arc. I mean, it's funny. I see a lot of reviews where people are just like, "Oh, the characters have no development," and I'm like, "Really?
No.
Were you reading a different book?
Apparently.
So much." But yeah, it's just this idea that he obviously wants to be a hero, but he doesn't think of himself as a hero, and then he only ever gets to be a hero as somebody else, basically, which is just like, how can you not like that? I love it.
It's so good. Yeah, so, and it's such a echo of all of those, some of our favorite animes, because you see very similar, those kind of redemptive, reluctant hero, anti-hero to reluctant hero arcs. And I always love those. I'm a big fan. Jihao was just great. And Itami, I think those two specifically, just the contrast that they had to each other, and Itami being kind of the axis of the Motley crew the whole time. I really appreciate it. And I love what I'm already loving about Spirits of Vengeance is seeing you setting up Haruto as a character who he doesn't need help. He can do it himself. He's, you know, he's so like solo in his mind, even with Guang. And he's like, I don't care how long you've been with me. Stay out of the way. You're going to get hurt. And you can tell how much of a fear he has of that. So I'm really excited to see how that all comes blowing up in the end of the book.
Yeah, I mean, it might do a little bit.
It'll
Who
be
knows?
fine. One of the things I want to talk about in Pawn's Gambit, I loved you really expanded on the magic system, I guess. If you I don't know, it's kind of weird to call it a magic system, but it is.
It is. It's kind of a soft magic system.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's kind of a semi-hard magic system, I guess. There are rules to it,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's quite nebulous in that
Yeah.
you don't know the techniques that they can do could essentially do anything. You know, we
Right.
have a character who can literally teleport. We have a character who is impervious to, you know, pretty much anything. We have a character who can bring stone statues to life. So
Which is so
it,
cool.
yeah, it allows for almost anything to happen, but it also has kind of rules around it. So I kind of think of it as a semi-hard magic system.
Yeah, it's almost it reminded me a little bit very faintly of like the Full Metal Alchemist kind of like that kind of a vibe. And the chess magic that you have in there was just one of the coolest magic elements I've read in a story ever. Like, where did that come from?
I mean, I don't really know. Like, because I mean, it started in Never Die. Obviously,
Yeah.
Dale Livingston is a very minor character, really, in Never Die. And I was just sort of like, yeah, she was the strategist. She was kind of based a bit on. Uh, I'm going to murder this pronunciation, Zhuge Liang. That's not how you pronounce it at all. But he's a major character. He's like a major strategist. From the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is like one of the big Chinese epics, basically. I'll pronounce his other name. He's also known as the Sleeping Dragon, and I can pronounce that one. But she's kind of based loosely on him to have this sort of like strategist character. So as I was sort of designing her, it was like, well, she's going to be sort of like, yeah, she plays chess because chess is like the ideal sort of like strategy game that you think of. And then it was like, what can her powers be? Oh, well, she's all about chess. What if she brings the chess pieces to life, sort of thing? So yeah, in Never Die, it was very much okay. These are the chess pieces. There's like pawns and all that, throw them on the ground. They come to life out stone statues. And then when I was just sort of like building the Pawn's Gambit, I was like, right, well, she's going to meet certain characters along the way, and then obviously she'll build a new chess piece with chess pieces with those characters as the pieces, and it works because they're all part of her journey.
It's so cool.
They get to participate in the end, even though they're not there. And
yeah, I love when there's that payoff at the end of the books where we've seen all of these things building into the story as we go along, and then we get to the end, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is so cool how it's all coming together, and it's just this massive like that ending for Pawn's Gambit was so good. It was so good.
Yeah. Designing it was bloody hard work though. I was like,
oh, I believe it.
There was so much, and but yeah, I think my favorite thing was having the horse Lump be one of the characters, because you know nobody expected the horse to be one of the characters. Come on.
No, of course not. Well, and I've noticed that you have some interesting animal characters in your stories as well, because I read Century Blade recently, and the goat, which is famous, and I remember hearing about it when I said I was going to read it. Everybody was like, "Oh, the goat," and I was like, I had no idea what I was in for.
Just a goat.
Just a goat, and that was the best part, because I was like, this is just, it's so like real. Because like
it's just for some reason there's a goat along for the adventure.
Sure.
That's it. It's
He's
just
bored.
a goat. Yeah. It's just there, so never forget your goat.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, I had another question about the chess game, and now I can't remember what it was. What what drew you to including the kind of there's definitely some steampunk elements with the how do you pronounce it? The Cocktains?
Yes, the
Yes.
Cocton, yeah,
So
they're sort of,
they kind of bring like a science-y element to the magic system.
yeah.
So where did that kind of piece enter into it?
I just I really wanted to have a bit more mysticism versus technology thing going on.
Mm.
But I didn't want like future tech or modern tech or anything. Um, so the way to get around that was a bit of steampunk tech, and I've always been a big fan of steampunk
Oh
anyway. To be
yeah.
honest, that's why I wrote a steampunk series. Um, and I love the fact that with steampunk you get to do things that you shouldn't be able to do with that level of technology normally. So you get to have things like helicopters, which shouldn't exist until like modern technology, but
Right.
because it's steampunk, you can do
Why
it.
not?
Um, so, and it got me, it allowed me to do things like have, this idea of a blood engine,
Yeah.
which when I first wrote Never Die was kind of just a word thrown in there. Because like the steampunk elements of Never Die they're not really there apart from there's a few
Sure.
things mentioned, like there's this, yeah, the blood engines mentioned, and like, so, but then when I started writing Pawn's Gambit, I wanted the bad guy to be this ticking clock character, which I
Mm.
had I had originally mentioned in Never Die, and then I didn't realize that I took out the mention of him in Never Die, so he's not actually mentioned in Never Die anymore.
Whoops.
Um, I
Editing.
didn't. I didn't actually realize this until Mahir, who's still in the chat, pointed out that he's never mentioned in Never Die. I was like, really? I was like,
Sure, I
no,
put
you're
it in
right.
there.
So yeah, it turns out that I completely removed mention of him, but I'd already created him at this point, and I really wanted to have this character in Pawn's Gambit when I decided that it was going to be there, because I loved this idea of um, almost clockwork character, and it
Yeah.
was very much based on. Have you ever watched the Hellboy films?
Oh yeah.
That first Hellboy film, there's the character, the bad guy who's filled with sand. Um,
Mhm.
and I loved him, like that
Yeah.
design, everything about that was just so cool. So I was like,
Yeah.
I want to do that, but my own version.
Yeah. So
So
you
that was
seem
where,
kind of like me where when you watch films, you're paying really close attention to the characters that are some kind of monstrosity because they're the more interesting. Like, how is that? How to? Ooh, that's cool. Like,
yes,
yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
love them. Like those sorts of, yeah, those sorts of characters. Like go back to like the bad guy in A Man Called Hero, the guy who he's
Mm.
called Invincible, he claws out his own eyes. Stuff like that is just like, oh. For some reason that just, it's striking. It stays
Yeah.
with you more than maybe like a more sort of like, oh yeah, you're just a bad guy. Like, who are the other bad guys in Hellboy? I don't know. Who cares? The
Right.
guy who's filled with sand and has to wind himself up. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's so I think it's so different, and I think we're always searching. At least I am. I'm always intrigued by things that are new that I haven't seen done before. Which is why, when you throws out these chess pieces, I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. Like, because you've had, animated statues are not a new thing in fantasy, but the chessboard and the fact that she's making pieces out of the people that have been traveling with her, like that was such a cool new take on that kind of animated statue idea. Was very cool. Mahir had a question. Will future Mortal Techniques books reveal more secrets about the gods? Pawn's Gambit definitely delved a little bit farther into that. I was very intrigued. Natsuko is a great character too.
Yes. Yeah, they will. I can't go too much into it because that would be spoiling of future books. But yes, there are going to be more gods. There's going to be more about the demons, the demon realms, and hell as well. Um, and yeah, the next three books are going to be very different. They're still going to be Mortal Techniques books, but the heroic age is over. So.
Are we still continuing that through line where we'll see maybe a familiar face or two?
Oh, definitely.
Awesome.
I won't say who, because
Well,
that's
that's the
spoiling.
fun
Yes,
part.
exactly.
That's the
There
fun
will
part.
be at least one character from Spirits of Vengeance moving into the next book,
Okay.
um, and also at least one character who is mentioned in, I think, all 3 of the books, but is never shown, will be making an appearance as well.
Very cool.
So book 4 is going to be called 7 Swords.
Nice. Heard it here first. Have you put that out anywhere yet?
I think I possibly have. I can't remember.
I haven't seen it, so I will definitely be keeping an eye out for that, because I'm going to buy it the minute it comes out, because I will have finished Spirits of Vengeance by then easily. So
I would imagine so, considering so far I've only written 10,000 words of it and it's on hold.
Well, I'll just read this really slowly. Yeah. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll have the entire War Eternal series done by the time that one comes out, and then we can have another chat about War Eternal. That sounds
I'm
like
always up for chatting about War Eternal and Eska. I love chatting about Eska.
Noted. So I wanted to mention there was a scene in here in the beginning that, again, kind of harkening back to that through line idea, when Haruto calls Omoretsu the first time, and he shows up and he's a little boy with a red scarf. I was like, oh, like the chills. It was one of those, and the way that it's written, it's so like just this dark cloud and chilling, and then you see the red scarf, and it was just like, oh, I love the through lines. Is one of my favorite parts of the series, because it's like you never know who's going to show up, and it's
so fun to do as well.
And why was it him? As you're like, just no, Haruto.
Yeah. Because there are clearly other Shinigami, but it's him. Yes, I love doing stuff like that. Just sort of like, linking them all together. It's one of the, like, doing it as a series where you've got, like, I don't know, it's a 5-book series like the War Eternal. It's following one character. It's not quite as fun, but doing it with a series of standalones. God, that's a lot of fun, because you know that the readers who are sticking with you, they're going to be the ones that are just like, they get to book 3 and they're like, oh, wait, that's the character from book 1.
Yep. And it's like, it's so chilling, because like that reveal of Ein at the end of Never Die, and like the, as everything kind of comes light. Although I have talked to a lot of people, slight sidetrack, I have talked to a lot of people who have read Never Die that are like, you got to ask Rob about that ending. The ending of Never Die is there's a lot of people left scratching their heads about it a little bit, it seems like.
Yeah, it was there's like 3 major twists that happen all within 10 pages, and they completely rewrite the entire book. So I have there's I'm not surprised that a lot of people are just kind of like, huh, what
just happened?
And it does all make sense, just about. I had to wrangle it all into place to make it all make sense. But it does just about all make sense.
Well, you did have a few threads to weave together there at the end.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, so because it's spoilers, I can kind of talk about it. So the general gist is all of the characters that Ein picks up along the way, apart from Royastara, Deseko, are all yokai. Mm-hmm. They are actually long dead heroes. He's not bringing them back to life. They're not actually being brought back to life at all. They are vengeful spirits of their previous selves. Royastara is different, because Royastara and Ein are kind of the same person, but Royastara is the grown-up version of Ein, and the Shinigami is kind of essentially wearing his old skin, because he technically died. Well, he did die. Ein died when his father murdered him, and then was brought back to life. But he was brought back to life basically with leprosy by the Shinigami, and then the Shinigami kind of owns him in some weird way. So there's that, and what's the other one people like to ask? Oh yeah. They want to know when it all really starts, because there's the book doesn't technically, the story
kind of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly.
So the story actually starts after the inn where Itami buries the Sentry Blade. Mm-hmm. Everything before then is kind of an illusion woven by the Shinigami to make Itami and Zihao believe that they are still alive. there are little hints throughout the story, like when they come out of the inn and they look back towards the city at the beginning, and it's like, oh, it looks absolutely fine, but then they just wander off. So, and like the fact that when they're approaching the inn, there's sort of like there's people murdered, and they're gone by the time they leave the inn. So there are sort of like little hints here and there. But yes, it kind of starts really at that inn.
Yeah.
And like Chendu Angut, he it's a weird one because he is actually already dead. He's already a vengeful spirit when they first encounter him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's kind of killed to make him believe that he's actually just been brought back to life.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot of timey-wimey stuff going on, like, and that when the heroes originally died is another thing. So like Chen Lu actually died something like, what was it? I had all the timelines mapped out, but he died something like 80 years before the events of Never Die took place, which is why basically nobody remembers him, despite the fact that he's like, but I'm Iron Gut Chen.
How does nobody remember me?
Yeah, never heard of you. And Zihao and Itami died at the same time, essentially about 20 years before Never Die starts, before it takes place. And Bing Wei Ma died even earlier than that, which is why nobody really knows who he is.
Too. Yeah, he's. It was funny because within that Motley crew, I mean, he's kind of the one that is the closest thing to an actual hero, I would say,
Yeah.
And it's again cool because one of the beautiful things of a Motley crew is you get to throw someone like Zihao right with Bing Wei Ma, and like there's again, I'm can you tell I love contrast in characters? I love it.
Absolutely.
It's great. And that was, I had my husband read Never Die shortly after I finished it, because usually I recommend, I read a lot faster than he does. So I kind of am his, like, I vet the books and then tell him which ones he should read and the ones that he'll like. And I was like, I need someone to talk about this book with. So I was like, read this. And he always really likes characters like Bing Wei Ma. And so I kind of predicted that was going to be one of his favorite characters, and he really enjoyed.
See, I like that. Not a lot of people say that Bing Wei's like their favorite character.
Which is sad because he's so cool.
I know, he's like, yeah, he is a hero. He's the unbeatable martial artist that's literally never lost a fight. I mean, you do spend like the least amount of time with him as with anybody else, but yeah, I had a lot of fun writing a character who's just so good. Just like, no, never lost a fight, never killed anyone. Just that's perfect.
Yeah.
Although, funnily enough, it makes me laugh. I remember a review. It was somebody who didn't like the book, and they were just like, "What's with the over description of men's asses?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "There's one scene where Itami basically ogles Bing Wei's ass as he's getting out of a river."
And that's it. Well, like that's the whole book, clearly, Rob. That's the whole book. That's it. It's funny because I don't even remember that being there.
No, it's like it's a throwaway 2 lines as he gets out of the stream, and apparently that was too much for them.
It's too much. No ogling, period. No ogling ever. Nope. No. Out of the question. You mentioned earlier a little bit, and I promise that I'm not going to keep you here forever, but you mentioned earlier Three Kingdoms, and I have been recently educated about Three Kingdoms a little bit more. I had no idea what it was until I met up with Baptiste Pinson-Wu from Twitter, who's writing Yellow Sky Revolt, the new historical fiction about Three Kingdoms. And yeah, it's fascinating to see. It blows my mind that we don't have more fantasy that's inspired by that, because there's so much there. I'm just blown every time. I'm like, oh, okay, so wow, and there's this, and where is all of this fantasy? It's amazing.
It is, and I mean, like, I absolutely love the romance of the Three Kingdoms. I've never properly read it because like finding a translation. I don't know.
Mhm.
And apparently it can be very dry at times. There's a lot of like,
Yeah.
yes, troop movements and everything. But I've listened to a podcast which goes through the entire story.
Nice.
I've done a lot of reading around it. There's like the films, Red Cliff and Red Cliff
Mm.
2, which are based upon it. My first introduction to it was actually with the Dynasty Warriors games.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And it was just like, wow. I mean, but I love the idea behind this sort of like, yeah, there's a massive armies and everything. There's all this politics going on, and there are warriors traveling the land who are there. This one warrior is worth 1,000 troops.
Mm-hmm.
They can just like cut swaths of people down, and I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And there are actually tons of films that are based around the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. A lot of them follow like Liu Bei and Guang Feng, I believe it is. And yeah, like some of them are just over the top, crazy fun, and some of them are a bit more serious, like Red Cliff. So they're just but there is not a lot of books sort of like detailing around that sort of period. And I guess it's kind of because it is considered to be historical fiction, although I'm not sure how historical it really is.
I mean, well, I mean, it's interesting because I know in Batiste's book, Yellow Sky Revolt, one of the things he plays with that you also do in Mortal Techniques, and it's something that I'm playing with a little bit in my book, that's just always fascinated me, is this idea of mythos and how these people grow to this like massive legendary level when they're people, and they might have done some really amazing things, but to see them become something completely outside of the human realm just based on the word of mouth and the way that people build them up. And I thought it was really cool in Spirits of Vengeance when they're walking through the hallway and they're telling the story of Night Song, and then Haruto kind of is like, oh, is that obvious? And it was like, this is just, I love that when you get to see this is the mythos that's been created around this person, and here's the actual person. That's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, because you do have these characters who are larger than life.
Yeah.
And then but then also bringing them down to like the personal level of saying, no, they're just people. I think
might be immortal people, but
yeah, in Haruto's case, yeah. But it's good because I think, especially in this day and age where celebrities are kind of accessible in many sort of sense, you see it, because it used to be like 20 years ago or whatever, you'd be like, film star, wow, don't know anything about them other than the films that they're in or whatever.
Right.
These days, like you can see them on Twitter and everything, and it's the same with authors as well. Like bringing it back again, it's like getting to talk to authors as I'm reading their books, and it's that sort of idea that these people who might have once seemed like larger than life unicorns, they are people. And like getting to see how they deal with everyday life sometimes is fascinating.
Well, and it's just, I mean, I kind of go into it thinking it's just, I'm excited just to talk and to see how all of these different authors approach writing differently and have all these different ideas, and what are the similarities and the differences between all these different writers. And was I right when I predicted whether they'd be a plotter or a pantser? And and it was actually funny because I got a comment from somebody a couple nights ago. It's like, oh my gosh, you're interviewing Rob Hayes. And I was like, yeah, I'm so excited about it. And they were like, yeah, but you're interviewing Rob Hayes. And I was like, well, yeah. You wrote some good books.
Yeah, I'm just a person.
That's just it. And I talk to people about that a lot because they ask me questions about how to network within the fantasy community. And I'm like, say hi. Start with a common ground. Hey, Rob, loved your book. It was great. I think people kind of mystify it more than it needs to be sometimes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I know for a fact that with authors, at least most of the ones that I know, like we're more than happy to chat with people, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
you know, especially like readers and the like who like our books. Like, I get messages quite regularly on Facebook or Twitter and everything. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just happy to chat with you or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
if you've got a question about my books or whatever, yeah, feel free to just shoot it at me. I'm more than happy to. And I mean, that's how, like, Mihir, who's, you know, in the chat, that's how he ended up as one of my alpha readers, because he literally just started talking to me one day,
Yeah.
and then didn't stop, and then didn't stop, and then didn't stop.
Yeah.
So I just started sending him books.
Perfect. Well, I mean, that's why, you know, when you put the books out there, that's for me at least, and I would guess for you too, that's such a big part of what makes all of the long hours that we put into these books and all the blood, sweat, and tears of the author worth it, is when we see people, you know, coming back and loving the characters, or, you know, thinking about the book or whatever it is.
Absolutely. It's terrifying putting your book out,
Oh, yeah.
having other people read it, but at the same time, it's absolutely wonderful. And there's so much fun to be had with other people reading your book as well, especially with like with a series. One of the most fun things is when people come up with theories about your sort of like your books, where they're sort of going, or, you know, like, oh, is this character or whatever, and they're sort of like, yeah, they're talking about it, and you're like, well, I know all the answers.
But I'm not going to tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose it's kind of cool to see people's own creativity come into play when they're coming up with, oh, I think this is going to happen. Or like, I've kind of started, I try not to predict endings of books too much, but I kind of have some things in mind that I'm like, I'm thinking like this might be where we're going in Spirits of Vengeance. I'm sure you're going to pull the rug out from under me at one point in here, at least.
I try to always pull the rug out from under my readers with every single book.
Oh, yeah. Well, you've done a good job so far. I'm impressed. But the last thing I want to mention is Shiki, I noticed, was mentioned in the tweet that you posted. And I got to say, like, from page 1 of this book, she's so great. Writing non-human characters is just, it's so much fun. Like, how is writing her and the character that she is, like, different from writing your human or slightly partially human characters?
Yeah. Yeah, she was so much fun. She was just like, okay, how it's just, okay, writing a playful spirit character that can possess anything essentially. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, because you get to really play around with it. The trick was to try and almost humanize her, but not, because you're trying to give her emotions and everything, which is tough when all you can do is whistle.
It's working. Like when she's sitting on Haruto's shoulder and she looks at the wig. That's all it had. I was like, oh, I'm so excited for this.
I want it. Yes. But no, she was great fun. I basically went, okay, I want to create a Studio Ghibli character.
Yes.
So that's Shiki. She's basically like, I wanted a Studio Ghibli character. So like, let's sprites and and all sorts.
What's your favorite Studio Ghibli movie?
See, I'm torn.
That's actually a tough question. I know
it is. Weirdly, the first time I ever watched Princess Mononoke, I didn't like it.
Same.
And now I absolutely love it.
Same.
I don't know why though. It's bizarre. Like, Roy Astara is literally based on the lepers from Princess Mononoke, because like they're sort of lepers completely wrapped in bandages, and you know, they're making rifles, and I was like, yes, I love that. I don't know why, it just stuck with me. But at the same time, I don't know. There's something about Nausicaa which just really speaks to me. I don't know what it is. But there's just something about it where I will just always love that film.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my favorite is probably Nausicaa.
Yeah.
But Mononoke and Spirited Away are really close behind it, to be honest.
Yeah. Nausicaa was the first Studio Ghibli I ever saw. And that was an excellent entrance into just, it's amazing how he can create such a, I mean, it's cozy fantasy, but with a very, like, it is grim, dark, cozy fantasy.
Oh yeah, there's some really dark stuff in there, but at the same time, because of the way that the especially the main characters are always sort of portrayed. They're very human and they're very compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just they're really easy to connect with,
Yeah.
which kind of makes it almost cozy in that sort of sense.
Yeah, I remember really enjoying Castle in the Sky too. I thought that was a really good one. Yeah, there's so many. It's fun to see, like, even though I didn't experience Studio Ghibli as a child, it has that kind of, something that I would have loved as a kid if I had seen it. And it's fun to see the things that we never really, we just kind of bring them with us through the entirety of our lives, and it continues to inspire. Like, this is going to sound funny after Studio Ghibli, but Yu-Gi-Oh was my first any kind of anime experience. And I remember watching it at 2 p.m. on the WB.
Yep.
and Yami as a character was like the pharaoh, for anybody who's watching this, or the pharaoh that lives inside of Yugi, who's the main character, inside his puzzle thing, was just like, I remember just being he was just so cool. And that was kind of the gateway into Asian storytelling in general for me. And I never looked back, because there's just so many, like you said, there's just so much there.
Yeah.
To play with.
I mean, there's multiple mediums, obviously, but yeah, it's absolutely massive. I mean, I absolutely love, and I've been watching anime since I was a kid. I used to sneak downstairs and watch it as well.
Same.
It's like we had like one channel, like back when I was a kid. Well, we had 4 channels back when I was a kid, and only one of them ever played. Like,
and you had to walk uphill both ways to get to the TV, and
yeah. So yeah, I used to sort of like sneak down past my bedtime. Everybody else had gone to bed. I'd be like watching martial art films or anime, and yeah, but the first sort of like series I ever watched, which really sort of was actually Dragon Ball Z.
Nice.
And funnily enough, I have this such a vivid memory still of the first episode I ever watched. And it's just like, and there wasn't even that much going on. It was like Krillin and Gohan flying around with Dragon Balls and Vegeta just like chasing them and stuff. And for some reason, that's just stuck with me, and I just absolutely love it still. So, and yeah, the things we watch that stick with us, we kind of want to emulate in a way, I guess.
Yeah, and that you see little bits of it pop up everywhere. You can tell a lot about a writer by what inspires them by the books that they write, which is very cool.
Exactly.
But, I mean, I could keep you on here for hours, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for sharing your time and for chatting your books. I hope that I will have a War Eternal series finished, so that later on we can have a chat about that, because I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about there too.
I'm happy to come back on when you've read the War Eternal. Always.
Awesome. I will let you know, and I will probably be sending you Twitter messages while I'm reading it. So thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for everyone who's still in the comments. Thank you for hanging out with us. And if you haven't already picked up any of Rob's books, I mean, I'm going to recommend Never Die as a place to start, but there's something for everyone. Rob has so many books and so many good entrance points to the books that he's written, so definitely go check those out. I think I have your website and everything down in the comments below, so you can go click that. Rob, any last comments for the viewers?
No, just thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. If you have read any of my books, if you haven't, get on and read my books.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you for being a reader.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rob and Mahir. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we will see you guys in the next video.